So I think digital technologies are leading to a level of disruption that is very, very high, and sectors are being disrupted that haven't really been up to now. So, for example, the banking sector fundamentally, up until very recently, worked in the same way that it has really for centuries. Sure, there was the advent of the ATM and the bank card, and then there was internet banking. But fundamentally, what happened behind those didn't change. Whereas with the advent of the challenger fintech banks, and particularly with changes in payment systems in emerging markets like China, India, and Kenya, what you're seeing is a completely different way of doing banking. And what that means is that essentially the financial services sector is having to kind of go back to first principles. And the reason why, for example, Kenya is at the forefront of this is that the Kenyan banking system really wasn't very well developed, which meant that there wasn't a huge array of legacy systems that needed to be essentially thrown away and to start again from scratch, unlike in, for example, the US.
Also, to add to what Neil said, what digital technologies have done is created a data deluge. And what we're seeing here in the banking sector is a good example of the organizations which survive, have the best fit to survive in this era are those that can do big data analytics. And these are the internet firms which have vast troves of data. 95% of the data today that we have is was basically on the internet. This is what we call semi-structured or unstructured data. This requires special resources and capabilities to develop. It requires natural language processing. And the traditional companies, particularly banks, don't have this capability. So this is where the internet companies have a significant competitive advantage over many of the traditional businesses.
And the mistake that a lot of banks are making is that, for example, you for a couple of years have had the growth of app-based challenger banks, and what the traditional banks are thinking is, okay, we come up with a really nice looking app which has things like notifications and the ability to lock your card, and provided we have an app that looks like one of the challenger banks, it doesn't matter that the systems behind that app fundamentally haven't changed. And that's not the case, because we're talking about a fundamentally different platform-based business model, which in turn requires a different approach to looking at strategy and particularly innovation.
Yeah. And also digital technologies enable us to dematerialize what were formerly physical products. And this enables organizations to actually deliver them in a different way. So once upon a time we'd buy a video or a CD or a DVD, but now we will stream our music digitally or stream our movies and so on and so forth. So this is why this is having an impact on so many industries.
Yeah, and the reason why the idea of platforms is so important is, as technology becomes more and more pervasive in our lives, essentially what we're looking for is to reduce friction. So what do I mean by reducing friction? I mean that essentially we want to be able to go about our lives and go about our business, whether that be banking, listening to music, getting from point A to point B. We want to be able to do that as effortlessly as possible. And you see with companies like Alipay and WeChat, so Tencent in China, that is the way that these sort of next generation internet-based platforms are developing. So we're moving towards a world where 20 or 30 years ago, you went to a shop, you had to get out a checkbook and write a check. Now you have to get out a card and you pay contactlessly. We're moving towards a world where people don't even want to do that. And, essentially people are looking for solutions that require things like paying for things, getting around, being entertained, just sort of happen automatically.
So we're in the era of 24/7 on-demand convenience.
Yeah.
And the digital technology enables us to do this. So the fact that it's also a term called non-rivalrous. What this means is that a physical product, only one person can own or use it. But if it's digital, then multiple people can access it. And that goes for music and physical books and things like that. So this is also a result of digital technology.
Well, it means that there are very large companies in multiple sectors that have built up a way of doing things, and in some cases very large and complex systems behind those, which, given the move towards platform-based ecosystems and given general kind of changes in technology, those systems just don't work anymore. And what they find is that they were at the cutting edge, or they were leaders in their sectors, because of these legacies and this heritage. And all of a sudden, the heritage has gone from being their biggest competitive advantage to their biggest competitive weakness, because they're hindered by these legacy systems and traditions, if you like.
I mean, internet-based platform ecosystems are the most efficient way of delivering services and products now. The reason for this is the fact that they have so much information. I mean, a pure platform doesn't actually produce anything. It coordinates buyers and users, and it acts as a marketplace. These are what we call two-sided or multi-sided businesses. And this is a far more efficient way of actually, because of the data, they can micro-target and micro-segment markets, and the cost bases are much lower. So the old Coase's reference in economics to hierarchies or markets. These are basically network markets who can deliver products and services more cheaply, and they can target specific people, and they can also provide it 24/7 as well.
Yeah, and they can provide it on a global scale, and that creates huge issues in terms of particularly regulation. So if you look at financial services, is it really possible to stop, for example, the Chinese technology giants entering markets that they're not regulated to enter? I mean, we see already that in quite a lot of retail in London, you can pay with WeChat and Alipay. So, clearly there's a gap between the technology and the companies that are at the cutting edge of this technology and the regulators.
Also, the core competency view, the core competency of the internet firms is data and their ability to disseminate data and do analytics. And when you think about what does an organization process, it only processes three things: data, information, customers, and sometimes materials, if you're a manufacturer. And since most companies are service companies who process customers and data, and essentially we can dematerialize the physical products into digital formats, this means they can potentially go into any market and disrupt any market via their platforms. So,
while delivering a level of service that's incredibly personalized. And we're already seeing that. So I use Spotify, and I'm constantly amazed that I open up Spotify and it has an incredible ability to predict my taste in music. And that's an example of personalization through big data that's happening already. And when you think about how that can evolve, it's really kind of mind blowing. So, for example, at the moment, if I want to apply for a credit card or a mortgage, then there will be a credit search based on my records with 2 or 3 credit reference agencies, based on my previous credit behaviour, basically. The amount of data available means that it's actually possible to get a far more rounded view of me as a potential borrower by looking, for example, at my social media activity, or even by looking, as is possible through the fact that I carry a smartphone and I wear a Fitbit. Looking at where I go and what I do, and how I do these things. So, for example, if I'm a less than careful driver, my smartphone will be able to pick that up. And all of that means both an ability to offer a far more personalised service, to make far more accurate, I suppose, predictions and decisions, But then there's a trade-off there in terms of privacy that from time to time becomes very controversial. Now, interestingly, companies like Facebook have been controversial recently because of specific privacy scandals, but nonetheless, almost without thinking about it, we're prepared to hand over personal information in a way that suggests that we trust the technology companies that we interface with far more than we trust, for example, our banks, particularly after the 2008 financial crisis.
This also reveals the difference between platform companies and traditional businesses.
Yeah.
What you're referring to is behavioral analytics and
Yeah,
data mining, and only the big technology platforms can do this. But they are becoming victims of their own success in terms of the extent to which that then invades privacy, and this is something they'll have to look at going forward. But customers, Facebook's numbers are going to keep going up. Their share price has gone up, and people are content, or most people seem to be content between the trade-off of sacrificing data for free services. It's a trade-off.
Absolutely, but I think a thing that illustrates is that there are huge technological changes coming, and to some extent, we can predict those, or at least we can make intelligent attempts at prediction. There are also massive social changes coming. For example, in the way that people interact with each other, issues around privacy and how people feel about the large amounts of data being generated about themselves, and those are far harder to predict. And I think that's why it's important that in the book, we talk about technology, we talk about platforms, we talk about the international nature of these platform-based companies, but we also bring in tools to help people who are making these kinds of strategic decisions, and students who are going to go into those kind of jobs, think more creatively about ways in which incredibly uncertain futures can unfold. So that's why, for example, there's quite a lot of
scenario planning.
There's quite a lot of discussion of scenario analysis, which is an important technique in this area, and those things are going to be incredibly important for people working in this space. I saw a comment from a leader of one of the challenger banks recently saying that the problem that they have increasingly isn't a lack of people who can do data analytics and coding and all of that sort of thing. It's people able to think in the right way about the long-term future.